It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in downtown Chicago. The streets shimmered with puddles, umbrellas bobbing like dark jellyfish under the gray sky. Inside one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, Le Marie, soft jazz trickled through the speakers, and conversations flowed like the red wine being poured at every table. James Waverly, 49, sat alone at his favorite table, near the window. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, with silver hair and an unreadable expression. A self-made millionaire, James was known among the elite for his empire of tech startups, charity investments, and quiet power. But today, he looked tired. Not the kind of tired money could fix, this was soul tired. His eyes stared blankly at the untouched plate of sea bass in front of him. His assistant had begged him to cancel this lunch. "You need rest, sir," she'd said. But he came anyway, hoping maybe food or routine would anchor him from the growing emptiness since his wife passed. That's when she walked in. A hush rippled across the room like a cold wind. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. A girl, maybe 11 or 12, stood at the door. She was small, wearing an oversized army green hoodie soaked from the rain, with dirty jeans and old sneakers. Her hair was matted. Her cheeks hollow. She looked out of place. The maitre d' rushed over, whispering harshly. "Miss, you can't be here." She didn't move. James looked up. Their eyes met. Then, in a voice so soft yet clear enough to reach his table, she asked. "Can I eat with you?" Gasps echoed. A woman at the next table scoffed. A man muttered, "This is a private establishment." Someone else whispered, "Where are her parents?" James didn't answer right away. He stared at the girl. Something in her eyes. Familiar pain. Hunger, not just for food, but for dignity, for acknowledgement. He stood up. The maitre d' stepped in. "Sir, if you'd like, I can call." "No," James said, his voice firm. "She's with me." He extended his hand. The girl hesitated, then walked forward and took it. Silence fell over the restaurant like snowfall. James pulled out a chair for her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila." "Hi, Lila. I'm James. Let's eat." Part 2, The Truth Behind the Ask. Lila ate slowly at first. She'd chosen the warmest thing on the menu, a bowl of seafood bisque. James ordered 2. Then bread. Then pasta. She hesitated before every bite, as if waiting for someone to snatch it away. James noticed but said nothing. Halfway through the meal, the whispers started again. "This is absurd. Is he doing charity now? Maybe it's a publicity stunt." James ignored them. "So, Lila," he said gently, "where are you from?" She looked down. "Nowhere." He waited. "My mom died last year. Cancer. We were living in a shelter. Then it shut down. I ran away from the new one. It wasn't safe." James nodded slowly. "Do you have any family?" She shook her head. "I used to. But they stopped answering." A tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. James swallowed hard. "How long have you been on the streets?" 8 months. "And this is the first time you've asked someone to eat with you?" Lila nodded. "You didn't look mean." He blinked back tears. "I lost my wife last year," he said. "Car crash. We used to eat here every Thursday. She believed food could heal people." Lila looked up. "She sounds nice." She was. A man 3 tables over stood up. "This is a restaurant, not a soup kitchen. You're setting a dangerous precedent." James slowly turned. "You're right," he said calmly. "This is a restaurant. A place where people come to feed their bodies. But maybe, just maybe, it should also be a place to feed the soul. He turned back to Lila. "Would you like dessert?" She smiled. "Yes, please." The restaurant fell silent again. Then, something unexpected happened. The waitress, Carla, walked over with tears in her eyes. She placed a slice of warm chocolate cake between them. "On the house," she whispered. Lila looked at her, stunned. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart." The kitchen doors opened again. This time, it wasn't food, it was the chef himself. Tall, tattooed, his apron stained from a day's work. He came over and stood by the table. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago," he said softly. "She'd be about her age now. If she was still here. I'd want someone like you to say yes." James stood up and shook the chef's hand. No words, just gratitude. The moment cracked open something deeper in the room. One of the servers knelt beside Lila and offered her a handmade cookie. Another diner, an older woman with pearls and trembling hands, slid a note across the table. "You remind me of my son. I lost him too. Thank you for giving us hope." It was as if a single act of compassion had swept through the room like a bomb, waking everyone up from their curated lives. Lila looked around, bewildered. "Why are they being so nice?" James leaned in and said, "Because you reminded them what being human really means." Part 3, the movement that followed. By the next day, someone had leaked a cell phone video. The footage of James Waverly inviting a homeless girl to eat in Le Marie exploded online. News outlets scrambled. Headlines read: "Millionaire breaks all rules to feed a homeless child, and inspires a nation." Within 48 hours, the restaurant had a line out the door, not of the elite, but of everyday people who wanted to experience what they called the Lila table. James came back every Thursday. Lila did too. But he didn't stop there. James launched a new initiative, Tables of Grace. Partnering with high-end restaurants across the country, the idea was simple: one table every night, reserved for someone in need. Paid for by donors. Served like any other guest. He hired Lila's favorite social worker, Ms. Ellie, to help build a network that would carefully invite and support children and adults living on the edge. Months passed. Lila was no longer homeless. James became her legal guardian. She went to school. She wrote essays. She drew pictures of Le Marie with a chocolate cake and her name etched on a golden plaque, the Lila table. She spoke at schools, at conferences. At 10 different restaurants. Always ending her story with the same words. "I didn't ask for money. I just asked to eat. But what I got was a family." People cried every time. And every Thursday, without fail, James and Lila shared a meal together. Not just for themselves. But for the millions of people watching. Learning. Changing. Sometimes, all it takes is one small voice, a brave question, and a heart willing to say yes. The media frenzy surrounding the Lila table only intensified as the days passed. Journalists dug into James Waverly's past, trying to understand the man who had become an overnight symbol of quiet rebellion against social apathy. But the story they uncovered painted a picture far more layered than the headlines could capture. James hadn't always been wealthy. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, he was the son of a librarian and a postal worker. He grew up in a small home with peeling paint and a leaking roof, raised on values that emphasized hard work and humility. His parents never had much, but they never turned anyone away from their dinner table. It was his mother who'd first taught him the power of an invitation. She would leave an extra chair at the table every Sunday. "For whoever needs it," she used to say. James didn't understand at the time. But now, sitting across from Lila week after week, he did. He remembered a time, at 15, when he'd been beaten up for defending a classmate who was homeless. That classmate, Tyrone, disappeared not long after. No one cared. No one asked. It haunted James for decades. He'd buried those memories beneath the grind of Silicon Valley success, venture capital meetings, and glossy galas. Until Lila's question cracked it all open. "Can I eat with you?" It wasn't just about food. It was about belonging. Across the city, a woman named Carla, yes, the waitress, watched the online video again and again, each time with tears in her eyes. She had a story, too. 5 years ago, her brother David had disappeared after a string of bad luck and worse choices. Drugs, evictions, shelters, silence. No one in the family had heard from him since. When she saw Lila in that restaurant, something shifted. That night, after her shift, Carla started volunteering at a shelter. It became weekly. Then daily. She left Lil Marie 3 months later, not out of resentment, but purpose. She opened a non-profit cafe downtown, one that operated on pay-what-you-can pricing. It was called Second Seat. The first mural on the cafe wall was a painting of a little girl in a green hoodie, sharing cake with a suited man. And Lila, oh, Lila, she had more story to tell. After James became her guardian, Lila began therapy. The early sessions were tough. She didn't trust adults easily. She struggled with nightmares, hoarded food under her bed, and flinched at raised voices. But with time, and love, she bloomed. She learned to swim. She started painting. She joined the school debate team. She made friends who didn't ask about her past but embraced her present. One of them, a boy named Elijah, became her closest companion. He, too, had a history with foster care and street life. Together, they started a podcast called Empty Chairs. Each episode told a story of someone who once felt invisible, and the person who saw them. It exploded in popularity. Schools began playing episodes in class. Listeners from around the world submitted their own stories. One day, during an episode about gratitude, Lila said something that went viral again. When someone gives you a seat at their table, it's not about food. It's about seeing you. It's about saying, you matter enough to be here. Meanwhile, Lil Marie transformed. What was once an elite, velvet rope dining space became a flagship for the Tables of Grace movement. Celebrities, executives, and artists dined side by side with veterans, orphans, and recovering addicts. The maitre d', the same man who once tried to escort Lila out, now led an internal inclusion initiative, training fine dining establishments on hospitality with dignity. They called it Service of the Heart. He confessed, publicly, in an interview. "I judged her because she didn't look like she belonged. But that day taught me, belonging isn't something you wear. It's something you're invited into." The ripple effects were endless. A retired couple from Arizona donated their savings to open a mobile food truck that toured underserved neighborhoods with gourmet meals. A chef in Detroit started a YouTube channel featuring recipes taught by homeless individuals, celebrating their cultural knowledge. And in one small town in Kentucky, a 9-year-old girl set up a table in her school cafeteria with a sign that read, "Sit here if you're alone." She said she got the idea from Lila. The world didn't change overnight. But week after week, story after story, it became a little softer. A little more willing. A little more human. And it all began with a rainy afternoon, a bowl of bisque, and a question that pierced through indifference. "Can I eat with you?" 3 years after that rainy afternoon, Lil Marie no longer looked quite the same. Though still elegant, there was something softer about it. The lighting felt warmer. The staff smiled more genuinely. And on this particular Thursday, something extraordinary was about to take place. The mayor's motorcade parked outside. Local and national news crews gathered with cameras and microphones. A brand new bronze plaque had been placed at the front entrance of the restaurant. It read, "This is where it began, one meal. One question. A movement for dignity and belonging. Inside, at the very same corner window table, now preserved with a permanent golden placard labeled, the Lila table, two familiar figures sat side by side, James Waverley and Lila. Lila, now 15, no longer wore oversized hoodies or guarded expressions. She wore a soft yellow dress, a small silver bracelet, and the calm confidence of someone who had grown roots. Her hair was brushed into a neat bun, and she carried herself like someone who knew she belonged. The restaurant was closed to the public today, for a private event. But not private in the exclusive sense. They were dedicating the opening of the first Lila Community Center, funded by James's foundation. It would provide transitional housing, education, therapy, and mentorship for youth without stable homes. A model of what support should look like, dignified, empowering, and lasting. At the podium stood Lila, flanked by two other teens who had once been homeless and were now scholars, artists, and advocates. She took a breath and addressed the room. 3 years ago, she said, I asked someone if I could eat with them, not because I was brave, but because I was starving. That day changed my life, but not just because I got a meal. It changed my life because someone said, yes. Sit. You matter. She looked at James, who nodded, his eyes full. Every time we invite someone to our table, we're saying, you belong in this world. Not because you earned it. But because you're human. The audience stood. Thunderous applause. After the ceremony, James and Lila sat at the original table once more. The maitre d', now proudly bald and smiling, brought them the same dessert as always, warm chocolate cake. Across the restaurant, people shared meals with shelter residents, case workers, and strangers who didn't feel like strangers anymore. A small sign on every table read, "A seat is waiting. For whoever needs it." James turned to Lila. You ready to change the world again? She smiled. One table at a time. They raised their glasses. Sparkling cider. And as the city skyline blinked through the windows, hope radiated through every forkful, every conversation, every act of quiet welcome. The girl who once asked for a seat now built tables for others. And the man who thought he had lost everything had found a new reason to live. Together, they didn't just serve meals. They served something far rarer. They served dignity. They served love. They served change. Years passed. The Lila Community Center expanded to 5 locations across the country. Tables of Grace became an international movement. And yet, the heart of it remained the same, one invitation, one table, one human moment. At Le Marie, the original plaque still gleamed. The Lila table was still there. But now, there was one more addition, a small, beautifully carved wooden chair that remained unoccupied. Every Thursday, it sat empty, cleaned, polished, with a cloth napkin neatly folded on the plate. A sign beside it read, "This chair is for the one still waiting to be seen. The one still walking in the rain. When they arrive, they'll have a seat. No questions asked." It became a quiet pilgrimage. People from all over came to see the chair. Some left notes under the plate. Some whispered prayers. Others simply sat nearby, remembering their own moments of being invisible. Lila, now 17, visited the table every year on the anniversary of that rainy day. She'd place a flower on the seat and sit beside it in silence for a few minutes. Then she would rise and walk back out, not with sadness, but with purpose. She knew the world still had too many empty chairs. But she also knew how powerful it could be to pull one out and say, "This is for you." So, she kept building. James, older now, watched her grow with pride. Not because she was his legacy, but because she had become her own. And long after both their names faded from headlines, the story lived on. In diners and schools. In shelters and fine dining halls. In whispered prayers and loud protests. It lived in the act of making room. Because somewhere, someone is still asking, "Can I eat with you?" And the answer that changes everything is yes.